Right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining today's session on IBM's Cyber Resiliency and Assessment Tool. The CRA tool is probably the best way to describe this. It's not the greatest acronym in the world. So what I'm going to do on this particular session, we're about 30 minutes time on this particular overview. So it's give you a view of the why, the what, and the how. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through a couple of slides, not too many. I'm not going to keep it too onerous. But what I'm going to do after that, I'm then going to break out into actually showing you what the tool looks like, what the questions are, and then it gives you an actual feel of what it really is. So I don't just want it just to be complete all presentations about what it is. I'm actually going to show you what it is in IBM's kind of, I suppose, an honor to the show and tell kind of methodology that are coming out. So yeah, if you don't know me, my name is Mike Potter. I'm part of the Tech Data technical community here. So we do have a really good team here at Tech Data. I also have the call one of our European guys, Jay, who will I've got a slide which I'll introduce him to you later. He's part of our security team in Europe, and he'd love to speak to you as partners too. Right, let's go into the why. The why, to be fair, for me, encompasses lots of things and is really quite an interesting topic. But I won't hang around too much on the why because I think we've probably seen a lot of it. But I just wanted to set the scene with where we are. Obviously, a lot of our customers are being attacked. Let's face it, the cyber resiliency message is very much so the top of most clients' strategy at the moment. And I suppose what is the big question is, what would happen if you lost everything? Would you have a strategy? Would you be able to restore from that? Are you fishing for your backups over weeks or months? Is there a way that we could help you to get your business up and running if the inevitable did happen? So for me, it's a real combination of conversations around data and security. So it's kind of two things coming into one, and that's where I suppose a little bit of the complexity is. And this is why we have a tool to hopefully help you out a little. So one of the, I suppose, the key messages that I see, very much so at the why, is absolute resiliency of security is for me, I completely agree with this slide, is absolutely impossible. So we really need to consider all things within our environment and everything that we're doing. So yeah, lots of things to think about there. And we need to make sure that when we're speaking to our client base, that we need to understand that all of our solutions, say whether that be on-prem or off-prem, or compute or storage based, that we are building them for cyber resiliency and the ability to actually deliver these with any outcomes if anything happens. Because previously we were very much designing our solutions with availability in mind. So you're thinking of HR, you're thinking of DR, whereas actually we're looking at malicious attacks here, unfortunately, and the statistics for malicious attacks get ever worse. So this is part of my why, but this is also part of the answer. So IBM have created the blueprint called Cyber Vault, and a lot of you might be familiar with this, but the people who aren't, it's made up of quite a few components. One of the core elements to it being safeguarded copy. You can see here in the top left, and being able to make those immutable copies of your data. So it's quite a simple and fundamental thing to do. But also we have in the top right, we have proactive monitoring. So this is combining tools such as Storage Insights, again, very data-driven tool, but then we also look at SIEM tools such as QRadar. And that's where, for me, I'm personally more storage-based than security-based. I need to engage with our security teams to understand what our options are. And with this blueprint, it's really flexible from IBM, so it doesn't have to be an IBM SIEM tool. So you might have other SIEM tools within the client, and this is where a real combination of things start to, we need to be able to have broader conversations. And then part of the blueprint is being able to get this data when we've made the immutable copies and validate it and test it and then restore it. And then in the bottom left-hand corner, this enables you to get to your rapid recovery. So you say we're doing kind of a number of things there. We're detecting, we're recovering, we're doing lots of things around here. And it's trying to think about how are we going to engage with a client to understand their environment, to get to this point of actually delivering them a blueprint and enabling them to get to a more solid and resilient solution that they have. So one of the elements that we are seeing as, again, as a solution is being able to actually combine QRadar with IBM storage. We can actually demo this today. So this is actually quite a demo for us to do. If you want to see it, let me know. Happy to have a conversation with you. But again, as a partner, I start to think, well, I might only have storage skills, or I might have security skills, but I don't have storage skills. How do I go about having this conversation? And this is where the CRA tool comes in, because quite often you've ever seen any of my presentations or the IBM presentations, our first step is to do a assessment. And that's where the CRA tool comes in. So what it is, it's based on the NIST cybersecurity framework, the National Institution for Standards and Technologies. So basically it goes through these particular 5 points of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And if you think about what we're offering as a blueprint, it's actually incredibly similar to that. So you'll see that this particular tool, it divides it into those sections. And what it is, we're asking questions to get a good understanding of what our client's solution looks like, what the deployment is. And what it is, it's identifying those blind spots. And what basically on those blind spots, we can start to give recommendations for improvements. So it's not a test as in it you pass or you fail. It is not it's very consultative. It's very to understand what your customer is. And I did see a good webinar about this only yesterday, and they almost described it as, excuse me, as couples counselling for your IT department in effect. So being able to have a round table to say, well, we know that a threat is out there. We know that it is probably inevitable, it's going to happen. How do we actually protect ourselves against that? And is there anything that we can do to make sure that we're on the right track? So it really is a journey for your client base to understand what they have, what are they doing well, what could they address, and how do we actually move that forward? The good thing about this particular assessment tool is that it isn't IBM overly branded. If when I open it up, you'll see it, and it is very neutral. It is based on the security framework around these five pieces. So this is kind of what it looks like. I will break out in a moment to show you what the actual sheet really looks like, not just a screenshot. It's simple yes/no questions with a degree of being able to actually decide of how well you're up to. It is completely vendor agnostic. So if you're a customer that is not familiar with IBM, this is a great tool for you too. Whereas it's non-invasive, and this means it is literally a Q&A with some of your business leaders or anybody in your security practice. It's not like the client assessment that we have for storage, where it's that is actually a script and actually runs something on your system. This is actually a Q&A. This is real consultative engagement. On this particular side, it says IBM funded, but actually really that should say free is the answer, because this is accessible to all business partners on Seismic. I will share the link with you. It takes around about 2 hours to complete. So there are quite a few questions on there, but in this day and age where we can actually jump on a Zoom call or we can jump on a Teams call quite easily with a lot of customers, we can split that up into multiple sections depending on where you are. So you might find that particular parts of the business are able to answer questions around identify more easily, or you might find that some people, we might have response unit within a particular business and they might be able to answer that question, those particular sets of questions. So you can actually split it. But the good news is that IBM or Tech Data, we are more than happy to help you, walk you through this if you do have a client to run through it with you. So here's some of the deliverables. Just kind of gives you actual detailed assessment report. It gives you a score. You can see here, it's quite small, but I'll show it in a moment. You can see like maturity level of practicing or developing or your initial point. So it's quite a reflective score, and it kind of gives you a view of where you're at in each of those sections. It gives you a roadmap of recommendations and considerations and improvements. So really what we could do, say, once we've actually gone for this Q&A with a client, we can actually have a good look to see what's in there, what items we think we could look to improve on. Some of them are process-based, but maybe internally for the client. Some of them, obviously, we would have a solution to potentially look at with them. And that's where the consultation piece certainly comes in. And how is this all done? So it's quite easy to do. So really, it's a case of identify those particular clients that we think we could do this with. It takes around, say, 2 hours to do. Bit of engagement of 2 to 5 days to actually understand what they've answered and what they haven't answered and see how we can help them. And actually then do a report, presentation, and a roadmap and drill down with you. And then it's just a case of understanding and, and creating a design if they want to address certain areas and how we can actually implement that to that particular client. Okay. So what I'll do now, I'll stop this share and actually I'll share the tool itself. Just bear with me. Okay. Right. Hopefully you can all see that. So this is the actual tool itself. It is a Excel spreadsheet. So it's quite simple to digest and understand. It rolls you through exactly what you need to do. So we have, again, the 5 pillars you'd expect. One of the questions we quite often get is intended audience. And it does actually answer this question here really well. In that, intended audience for me is storage backup administrators and IT security representative. So it's real kind of a wide range of people, depending on who can answer the questions. And then the results presentation could go to decision makers or business owners to see if they could act on those particular results. So it really depends on how, what is actually going on in your client and who you can actually engage with. So there are, I guess you just kind of need to consider if you can get a sponsor within your particular clients. It's obviously easier if they do have a security personnel who looks after that whole section, they will be very interested in that and then be able to pull in the required resources to answer the questions as required. So what else have we got in here? So you can see here we've got customers based information. I'm going to go through that, but basically what we have here on each of the questions that you're answering, all it is doing is basically assigning you a score of 0, 0.5 or 1 based on responses. It then maps it to those 5 maturity levels, and that's how it gives your answer. It also gives it in a lovely visual representation, which I'll show you what that looks like, and is great for your charts, which makes you look great as a business partner, which of course is what we want to do. But essentially, when you actually get the scores and the definitions, they are not a pass or a fail. It's not as brutal as that. It's to give you an idea of where you are. So if you were to get a 10, you would be leading, 8, mature, practicing, developing, and initial. So you might find that some customers in some areas are at the initial stage, but what we need to do is understand how we can get them to that journey and get them more further up on the range. So if we have the value proposition here, which is kind of basically what my presentation is today. Again, exactly the same as what I've kind of presented to you. It does it over 20 key categories. So there is quite a lot of categories in here to understand, but they are kind of reasonably mixed up. So if I show you actually what the Q&A looks like, again, you always look at these sheets and you think, well, that's an awful lot of information to digest. And it is. But then if you're dividing it over 5 sections, it's not as bad as you think. It's just a section possibly per person or a section per department. And the questions are wide-ranging. So if I show you some of the identify questions, and they are quite simple, as if to say, are your physical devices and systems within the organization actually inventory? And you can see some of them are really quite simple, and some of them are kind of, I suppose, lean towards, and you can see this, have you got a single pane of glass for management for storage? I know as a storage person, we have a single pane of glass for management storage if they want one. So we can actually start to think about this. So, well, when we go through, if they said no to that, well, I know that I actually could address that as a solution. And we tend to find that going further through, we've got questions around governance, risk assessment. These are the categories that I mentioned to you. And then it all under the header are different sections of protect and identify as we go through. And of course, we can see that we've got questions around, I mean, I can see it as a storage person, there are a mix of questions between storage and security. So you can see we've got encryption at use at rest, which for me is an obvious storage question. But then we also have next to it encryption using transit, which is more of a security product question. So we kind of have a mix of lots of different things, and seeing how we can actually answer it with each of the clients, even to a degree that we have, is maintenance, actually taking place? Because you think about it, if you're not maintaining your equipment, you're likely not to be patched. That means that you're exposed. So it's kind of making sure, giving them a full health check of where they are. Detection is quite an interesting section, because what we tend to find in the detection elements is that we're thinking about, I suppose, the SIEM tools and any detection tools that they have. And this is kind of, say, a really interesting section for a lot of our security guys. So you tend to find that a lot of the conversation around detection tends to be very much so in the security arena. So you can see here we've got detection processes and event-driven information, which I kind of know it's some of our products that we, of course, offer. And of course, response, then if you start to think about our cyber vault blueprint of how we can actually respond to some of these are thinking about how we can actually analyze them as tools within security tools, and then of course migration, and do we actually have response plans and lessons learned incorporated with customers? So yeah, we've got lots of stuff around that, and lots of interesting things. I think I've just got a question there. Bear with me for a moment. Is there a sales document that links to question areas of specific solutions as part of a package or integrated response? Right, there isn't, no. So what I would say is that if you have completed one of these, I would work with either us as Tech Data, because I say we're interested in as Tech Data because we're vendor neutral to a degree, or you can work with your friendly IBM to do that. And basically what we'll do, depending on the results of what you are, if you had weaknesses in a certain area, we will narrow in on that particular weakness that you want to address and see if there's anything that we can do to make that better. So it is kind of a real kind of conversation, rather than say, if you don't get this score, you equal this. That is not what this is for. It's more of a trying to understand and really get a good view of what the client is potentially looking to address, rather than this is what, because what you tend to find that there are other assessment tools on the market and they are so product focused. This is quite neutral, and this is really quite well balanced as well. So I would really be more confident about showing this to a customer than saying, say, a Microsoft, for example, assessment, which just basically gives an answer of you just must buy something from Microsoft. This is kind of a real variation. This is kind of, you might be able to look at your response plan, and actually as a partner, you might find actually a lot of services would be involved in this, a lot of consultancy. Back to the chart. So we have like items around recovery planning. Again, this kind of, you start to think how this is maps to actually some of our cyber vault solution. But yeah, we can actually really start to think about what actually we're getting results. So let me have a look at results. So this is just something I filled in this morning, so it isn't actually referencing a particular client. But you can see here, even if I've give them relatively high scoring of practicing, which is where we're at, we still do have elements that we are developing and elements that we need to address. So it give you kind of a hone in. So it doesn't give you a straight answer to say, if you're weak in this area, you should address that. That's where we kind of need to have a conversation with either ourselves or with the IBM who's helped to walk it with you. The interesting thing is that IBM will actually walk you through this process. And I would say that really helps with the impartiality of it, because they don't know your client. So they will just literally be delivering this assessment. So they won't be commenting on products. They will just be delivering this assessment. And that's the important thing to understand. The conversation that we have between you guys outside of the clients, that is where we might say, well, we could look at certain products, but we wouldn't do that without your permission and your go. So for us, it's all about actually engaging with your clients and understanding, because we wouldn't be able to fit, let's face it, product discussions within running through all the questions anyway. So that is not what we're there to do. The guys who actually run through the assessment tool just solely do the assessment. What we do with it after that, that is the interesting bit as partners, and that's our opportunity as partners. Also in that, you get a lovely fancy chart, which again is great for your presentations. The larger the colored area, the better. That's essentially what that means. Okay, let me stop my share and just quickly go back to my presentation and some final thoughts. Okay. Right, hopefully you can see that. So some of the questions that I get is like, who should I actually be discussing this with? The obvious answer, I mean, obviously this is a very American slide. I know some of us have large clients, some of us have medium clients, some have small clients, and some have, let's say, clients that we have one guy that literally does everything. So it depends on who you're speaking to. I mean, ideally, if you can speak to the CISO, that's really a good place to start. But essentially, it's anybody who has security at the top of the priority and have been able to answer some of those questions and pull in the right people. So it will be a combination of some of the IT staff, some of the backup staff, of what actually they're doing. So you might find that you have to go to speak to a couple of people to get this done. And to be fair, to be pulling people on Zoom calls isn't particularly a difficult thing to do these days. Just wrapping into my final thoughts. I've got a couple of thoughts from a storage point of view, which I'm just going to share with you. I would say, let's make sure we're positioning cyber resiliency into our customers and speak to them about a safeguarded copy. And there is lots of competitive advantages around that. But what I would say is that if you're an IBM partner and you're very familiar with storage, make sure you speak to your existing client base with any of the systems running 8.4.2 or code or higher. You can start to do your immutable copy straight away. Again, make sure that we're trying to get to speak to them around using the cyber resiliency assessment tool. And this is kind of, I suppose, a little food for your thought, certainly from a storage point of view. So there are certainly lots of things from a storage element to help you. One of the main offerings that I see in IBM Storage that we need to make a lot more use of is the better way to grow. So I think that it kind of sums it up in this value statement here. So IBM Flash System will provide the upgrade of additional capacity you need going forwards by leveraging your existing non-IBM systems, simplifying management, easing the data migration. So basically, if you've got non-IBM systems, we can actually put a IBM system in front of it and deliver those immutable copies on that particular crown jewels of data of what they need to do. So this is a really good program if you're speaking to customers about cyber resiliency and they think, how on earth am I going to do it? How on earth am I going to address it? It kind of starts to get to the answers of where we are. And one of my colleagues, Jay, kindly prepped this particular slide from a security point of view. Jay, I'm not sure if you just want to say hello to everybody quickly.
Yes,
okay.
Mike, thank you for giving me this few minutes. Team, thank you also. I've been listening. So my first time in actually one of Mike's calls, real opportunity. Richard, great question. I certainly look to Richard and everyone on this call, to our great partners. I'm here working with Mike. Briefly, just a bit about me. I was an ex-IBM security in Europe for 7 years. I joined Tech Data last year. My focus is solely within Tech Data, IBM security. I'm here. I'm keen to work with any partner on this call today, Richard included, with your great question, who would like to work with me, because I'm keen to develop some messaging which might help you. I've got the support from IBM security in EMEA, in UK, as well as global. So I'm keen to work with a few partners, listen to you, listen to your needs, and see how we can work with you to help you. In this slide, I'm just giving a high-level view of some of the solutions that we already have. Mike's mentioned one already, which is QRadar. But when Mike and I were talking the other day on a call, I was saying, Mike, we talk about the mutable copies and the crown jewels, which is one of the points he just made. My question is, how many of our customers know where their sensitive data is? And there lies what some of the first questions, which I believe, which we can help you with. So there are a number of solutions. The Discover and Classify is that very thing, which is helping customers to identify where their sensitive data is. And then how do you then manage that in your overall process and people and technology? So keen to engage on that topic with you. One of the recent additions is the Reactor. Interesting, that's got the EU Commission Excellence Award. It was actually created in Europe, developed in Europe, and funded by the EU Commission. And it's a great EDR endpoint detection solution. Again, in the questionnaire Mike was referring to, there were some points around endpoints and how you manage endpoints. So again, we have some great solution there. IBM Guardian for encrypting your data in real time, and how do we manage that, as well as managing your keys to your encryption. So there's a whole data security solution there with Guardian. Of course, we mentioned QRadar. We can do more on the QRadar topic. The SOAR, as Mike was referencing, and the improvements in your response, the SOAR piece is very much helping now organizations to think about how do they put this response platform together, and how does the team and the people and the process and the technology work together. And the IBM SOAR platform is a tool, but it brings those key pieces together to make sure in the event there is a breach, how does your team respond? And again, we can share with more information with you on this topic. The IBM Verified topic is leads very much into, first and foremost, who's accessing our systems, whether it's internal, and in companies who are making their applications visible externally. Then we can also address the external consumers coming into the organization with two-factor authentication, etc. So there's just at a high level, just some information. And of course, wrapping around this is the IBM X-Force intelligence feed and information that we get on a daily basis. These are IBM experts globally, over 200 consultants who are monitoring what's happening in the security world. This is a daily occurrence now of where new threats are arising, and they're giving that, collating that intelligence, and then readily making that available to our customers and our partners. So in brief, Mike, I would say to the team, anyone on this call, maybe if you like to engage with me directly, I'm available. As much as I'd like to arrange a follow-up call with you, and if there are any particular topics you'd like to learn, I'm happy to work with Mike and go into each of these blobs, as I call it, on the screen today, and give you a bit more of a deep dive. But we're keen to work with you. We're happy to engage, get your feedback, and help you be more engaging with your customers on these topics. And I'm not saying these are going to be some topics that are easy, but we're there here to help you enable and really work with you on your let's say journey ahead. One final thought from me is, security topic tends to be not always in the IT department. Okay, so it's a separate team you may need to think about and how we approach them. So anyway, in brief, looking forward to working with you, Mike, and I'll hand you back.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, it's the shortest overview of IBM security I've ever seen, which is quite good. Thank you for that, Jay. So basically, yeah, to answer, say, questions on my mind, just think, well, if we've done this assessment, where do we go from there? The answer is we've got plenty of support behind you, whether that be from a data perspective, thinking about the storage element, or whether it's thinking about security too. So we can actually start to cover both off, and we can certainly work with you to build a model that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Right, so my final call to action. So my call to action, because we're starting to run out of time, as always, is contact your existing customers with the cyber resiliency message. And let's face it, most of them are probably extremely familiar with this, but it's kind of, well, asking them, well, what are you up to with security? And seeing what their view is, and seeing how we can actually help them. If they've got existing systems, they might be able to turn it on. Every call is a case of, well, what is their exposure? Do they have a risk? can we start to build a plan? Can we build a journey for them to make sure they have a more resilient solution, and they can actually react if they were attacked? Can we engage with the CISO or CIO to understand what the recovery plan is? Do they have a plan? I understand if they don't want to share it, fair enough, I understand that. But is it documented? Can we help? Can we assist? This is based, to say, on a neutral framework. And this is a really good starting point to think how we can actually, I suppose, use the technology that they might already have, or actually build elements that they don't have. So my message to you is, like, let's see if we can get some cyber assessment out there with our customers. And it's quite a simple and easy thing to do. If you do want to do this particular tool, it is available on Seismic for you to download. If you want to run any of these assessments, please give myself or the IBM team or Jay a buzz, and we'll see how we can assist you. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop me a mail or anything in the chat. But I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much for your time.